Nearly 15 years after her violent rape, Gauteng businesswoman Andy Kawa has had to face her rapist and relive the fateful day of 2010 at a Gqeberha beachfront. Enduring a 16-hour violent attack, blindfolded, restrained, she was raped 8 times and violently beaten. Last week in the Gqeberha High Court, Kawa endured grueling cross-examination, reliving her trauma as the defense attempted to cast doubt on her testimony. Let's discuss this trial now with Wise4Afrika Director, Advocate Brenda Madumise-Pajibo. Good morning and thank you so much for your time, Advocate.
Good morning. Good morning to your viewers.
Now, Advocate, firstly, can you share your initial thoughts on the Andy Kawa rape trial?
Listen, I mean, when we got to know about it and got involved in it, it was when the High Court in Gqeberha had made the finding and picked to the conclusion that she was raped and that the state was responsible and found, and the court was scathing on the police. However, the South African Police Service decided to appeal that decision, and they took the matter to the Supreme Court of Appeal. And that's how we got involved. And when the Supreme Court of Appeal found in the state's favor, meaning the argument of the police, then we decided to join Kawa's legal team together with Center for Applied Legal Studies to take it to the Constitutional Court. It took another year for the Constitutional Court to make a final decision and determination, because remember, at that time, there were vacancies in the Constitutional Court, so they could not sit and hear the matter. So it took another year for us to get the decision that gave us, one, the impetus to take it forward to demand damages, because she was given an order for damages. Those damages are still need to be quantified. However, the Constitutional Court was scathing on the South African police in their failure to investigate this matter correctly and properly, right? Because you'll remember, even in the testimony, some of the witnesses testified that they called the police once they met Kawa at the beach, you know, and they waited 45 minutes for the police to arrive. They never arrived. They took the decision to get into the car and take her to the police station. You know, so the police were supposed to have done the necessary basic investigation that at that point, right?
Let's expand on that.
Yeah.
So from the moment that a survivor of a sexual crime approaches the police, what are the processes that are meant to be followed by the police, and what are the rights of the victim?
So the rights of the victims are spelled out, and they know it, right? Because as the police, they know that they have Thuthuzela centers that they work with. The Thuthuzela centers can assist the police with, because remember, the Thuthuzela centers is almost a one-stop service, right? You walk in here, there is a doctor, there's a nurse, there's a social worker. So we take the DNA at the Thuthuzela centers. We've got a social worker who is debriefing and doing some counseling. There is the police there who's taking the statement, who are trained. Remember, it's trained police who understand what kind of questions to ask, right? That's what you do. Even if you don't have a Thuthuzela center, you go to your police station, you have and this is what the South African Police Service have been emphasizing, that they've got a victim room, right? So we take it that you take the victim to the room, proper team, which is called the FCS, right? This is the established unit that specifically looks at sexual assault violation and violent crimes specifically, right? They are then called to come in and interview you, right? And do the necessary things. If they are supposed to be taken to a doctor at a hospital, at that point, they're the ones who must do that, because they know how to secure the evidence, right? They know what kind of questions to ask, what kind of the statement, how it must look like. So they know that. They're supposed to do it, right? The police, the first responder at the police station does not have the requisite skills and training to do that. That's why they need to, once a victim arrives at the police station, they need to call in the FCS.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, this was the case 14, almost 15 years ago. How much has really changed? You mentioned the Thuthuzela centers. I mean, we know the immense challenges that have been plagued by the immense challenges that have been highlighted about the Thuthuzela centers in the past, not being adequately staffed, ill training, etc. What is the current status of these Thuthuzela centers?
So, Thuthuzela centers, remember the concept was a joint collaboration with foreign donors, right? So they put the initial seed capital for the Thuthuzela to be established, right? They assisted Department of Justice and Department of Health to draw up the pathways and the protocols around Thuthuzela centers. So for a good 10 years, we were solid because we had the funding for the Thuthuzela centers. Once that funding dried up, it was now the responsibility of the South African government to ensure that they are funded at the same level, right? So that's where we met the challenges, right? Where you realize that they are not being adequately resourced, right? And then the second aspect of it was that you need to have as many Thuthuzela centers as you can, but you are told of budget constraints. Where we are now is that they are functioning, right? But they're not functioning at full capacity because they don't have all the necessary funding that is required. And I think South African government needs to understand and appreciate the importance of the Thuthuzela Center and the role that they play in cases like these, right? So let's fund them to the fullest.
Especially in this country where we hold one of the highest rates of gender-based violence in the world.
Yeah.
Now, coming back to the Andy Kawa case, how does her particular case reflect on the challenges faced by sexual violence victims in South Africa?
You know, the travesty in all of this thing is when you as a victim have to relive that. And in Andy's case, Andy lived it, and she continues to live with it, right? But when she had to relive it during the High Court proceedings in Gqeberha, she had to relive it in the Supreme Court of Appeal, she had to relive it with the Constitutional Court, she had to relive it when we were working on determining the quantum that still has to go before court and for the South African Police Service to agree to the quantum that has been put forward. So she relives it on a daily basis. But I think what happened at the Gqeberha Port Elizabeth High Court this past week, and I don't know how Andy is still standing and still sane, that she had to endure the kind of questioning that came from the defense, right? To fight for herself and fight for her survival, for people to believe her story. And this is what happens with sexual violence and sexual assault and rape cases, that we don't believe you. We don't believe that you were violated and that you were violated in that manner. And in this case, you want to cast doubt on her testimony because you don't want to face up to what you have done to her.
And also, I mean, within the case, there was the issue of her having agreed to be his girlfriend because during the violent crime that was occurring, her rape, she had to agree to be his girlfriend to try and save her own life. Like, let's talk about victims having to cooperate and in some instances having to say whatever they have to say just to survive.
Yeah, and it shouldn't come as a surprise because most times when you are confronted with a violent rape, you literally become numb. And you want this ordeal to pass, just to end, right? So you do your damn best to make sure that you survive in this, and people tend to use that against you, right? To say, but you
Why
are
didn't
quizzed.
you fight?
Why didn't you fight?
Why didn't you kill him?
You are not there.
Yeah.
You don't know what I'm going through, what's happening at that point in time. And I think sometimes we are quick to pass judgment and want people to act and react on our timeline. And when that's not the case. We need to allow victims to relate what they have gone through and stop doubting what they have gone through because we are not there. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the backlog, the DNA backlog in South Africa. It's reached crisis levels, I mean, exceeding 140,000 cases. How does this affect such cases, rape cases specifically?
It does. I mean, you know, I was talking to the investigating officer on this matter when I was in PE. And I was saying to him, you know, with the work that we did, we fought hard for Eastern Cape to have a lab because they didn't have a lab, right? Every single test that needed to be done Either they had to take it to Cape Town or to take it to Johannesburg. And in the process of doing that, that evidence gets, the integrity of that evidence comes to question because it's now moving around, right? So we fought hard, and eventually, finally, they had to have a lab, right? So that has assisted with, you know, attending to many of these crimes that needs DNA testing and any other forensic investigation. So that's the first thing. The second is, by the time that lab came about, you already had a backlog, right? Nationally, right? That every police minister who came into power kept on saying to us that we are addressing it, right? And I want you to bring in the lab CEO here so that they tell us exactly where we are. Because if you are not dealing with the backlog and you've got current cases, I mean, we've got cases that are still outstanding. I mean, there's one that we are dealing with. It's 5 years that the victim has been waiting for answers on, yes, right? And she's still waiting, right? Come on, can we, as a country, when we say that these crimes are priority and that it's a pandemic, can we act the same, that it's a pandemic and our action must match that we pronounce?
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Let's talk about the numbers of reported cases versus the numbers of cases that make it to trial.
Right.
Could this be part of the reason why the conviction rates are so low? And what are the other reasons that you've identified?
Ms. Chaba, that the number of things that we need to account. So the first thing I think we need to know is that most of these cases are not reported. Not reported because if you witnessed what happened to Kawa, why do you think you're going to subject yourself to that? So you rather die in silence and suffer in silence.
And
right?
in Kawa's case, it's so unfortunate that I would have to say that she was fortunate enough to have his DNA.
Exactly, right?
In her.
Because they took it.
Imagine not having the DNA.
So when you don't have the DNA, right? So that's one. And the second thing is really about what victims think happens to them, right? If I report a rape today and I meet with ridicule, I meet with minimization of what has happened to me, why do you think many other victims of sexual assault and violence and rape would come forward? Because and having to then experience being cross-examined in a court, in an open court, and made to look like you caused all of this and you brought it onto yourself.
Or
right?
that you are lying.
And you are lying.
Yeah.
And all of that, right?
Now let's actually talk about, let's take it to the courtroom now. I mean, as we've seen in the Andy Kawa case, having to relive her story, which obviously is quite traumatic for her, but also for her children, her family, and people who are close to her. Now, I noticed that the medical specialist, I don't know if he's a doctor or a nurse.
He's a doctor.
A doctor.
Yeah.
Who came onto the trial.
Yeah.
His voice was distorted and his face was not shown.
Yeah.
Because that's his right.
Yes.
Does the victim have the same right?
Yeah, you can. You can do the same, right? Yeah. And in this case, by the way, the doctor who examined her passed away.
Oh, wow.
Right? So this doctor was brought in to really give the court the understanding of how they treat the evidence, what examination do they do, and just to give the court the confidence that even the DNA, remember the accused, by the way, has accepted that it was his DNA. Yeah.
But he says it was consensual.
Exactly.
I'm not laughing. It's just ridiculous.
Exactly. It is ridiculous. That, these women used to pay me 200 rands. Wow. Yes.
So he's saying he's some kind of gigolo.
Oh, can you believe it? And that we must accept that as evidence, and he cannot be convicted for this rape, right?
So does court make provisions for mismemory?
The judge is going to have to do that and weigh all of that, right? Remember, for me, is you remember certain things and then you don't remember certain things, right? So the accused in this case remembers that in 2010 he was there, but the women used to ask for him to perform sexual acts, so he can remember that, but he doesn't remember these women.
Right,
yeah?
right. So is that permissible? Can you say, because in some instances we almost think that you have to say yes or you have to say no. Can you say, I don't know, I don't remember?
You can't say I don't remember.
Right, because that's an answer. That's
it's an answer. It's a legitimate answer. You can't remember. For me, here is the judge sitting in this case is going to weigh. Firstly, there's a DNA that matches, right? That matches. And the cross-examination of the accused is happening on Monday, tomorrow, right? The prosecutor is going to ask the very difficult questions to the accused, and I don't think he's going to be able to answer them. And it's going to be very interesting what his responses are going to be.
What kind of questions do you think the prosecutor might ask the accused?
One, we're going to place you on the scene, right? Where you at the promenade. Because remember, this person is a bush dweller. He has not been living at home for the last 20 years or so.
So he's homeless?
He's homeless, right? He's homeless, right? The second thing is, how did your DNA find itself in Ms. Kawa's how did it? So you tell us, when you say you have been doing this and women have been asking you for sexual favors, can you just elaborate? When, how?
Right.
Yeah, so that we get to the bottom of this consensual encounter that you had and tell us how it was consensual.
Yeah.
Right?
So, I have so many questions.
I know.
But because we don't have a lot of time left, are there any policy changes or legislative reforms that Wise4Afrika advocates for to better support survivors of sexual violence?
Where we are, and thanks for asking that question, because, this case and many others, these individuals are represented by legal aid that you and I pay for, right? That's our taxes. That legal aid will give assistance by providing a lawyer to the accused, right? The victim, Andy Kawa, has had to fend for herself throughout this process, and many other victims. There was a bill that was put together, which was a bill, it was for the victim empowerment bill, really to look at the well-being and welfare of victims, right? It stuck somewhere in government, right? Because it was initiated by Department of Social Development. We put in submissions, many organizations put submissions, and there's a need for that bill to be finalized. And I'm urging the Minister of Social Development, together with the presidency, to fast-track that bill so that the interest of victims can be looked after. There's no way that we were able to support perpetrators and not be able to have a kind of a package for victims.
Oh,
yeah, and
And
survivors.
lastly, as we close, and very briefly, how do you think this case might pan out?
He's going to be found guilty.
Good.
I'm very certain.
All right.
Yeah.